Hi, this is Mr. Weston. Today we're doing a tutorial video on dividing negative proper fractions. This, of course, is from Math-DrIlls.com. Make sure to check out Math-DrIlls. I will link them in the description below. They are a great math resource. So if we're looking at all these division problems, a lot of people just look at division with fractions and they're like, man, this is way too complicated. How could I ever divide by a fraction when I already struggle with dividing by normal numbers? And I'm going to tell you it's a much easier process than you think. First, we need to start by understanding what multiplying by the reciprocal does. So let's take 10 divided by 2 to start. If we have something like 10 divided by 2, that essentially means we're going to split it into two equal parts. We're going to split it in half. And what does that equal? It equals 5. Now, let's take another example that's pretty familiar. If we multiply 10 by 1/2, we're essentially finding 1/2 of 10. Well, we get the same thing. How come these two are the same answer? And that's because dividing by a number is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. A reciprocal simply means if we have a number, let's say 2 over 1, which is equal to 2, and we flip the numerator with the denominator, that becomes the reciprocal. So this is one example that demonstrates that if we divide by a number, we can multiply by the reciprocal of that number and we get the same result. That leads us to keep, change, flip. That's kind of like the short, easy to remember way to go about dividing fractions. So multiplying by the reciprocal is the best way to remember. Keep, change, flip is the easiest way to remember. So let's apply keep, change, flip and multiplying by the reciprocal to these questions. We'll start with number 1. Now with number 1, we're going to first ignore this negative sign out front. I'll get to that in just a moment. But let's just stay with this dividing by fractions theme. We're going to keep, I'm just trying to stay on my same colors, so let's just actually bring this up. Okay, so we're going to start with purple. So purple is my keep. That means I keep this first fraction the same. So I'm going to keep it -2 over 3. Again, I'm just not worrying about this negative for now. I'll address that later. Change. This is done for you, but you can see that when we change, essentially what we're doing is we're changing the division to multiplication, kind of like what I did down here. Instead of dividing by 2, we multiplied by, and now let's do the flip part. The flip is flip the second fraction. Oops, I forgot to write change. Flip the second fraction to be the reciprocal of that number. So instead of 1/2, we're going to change it to 2 over 1. I just changed the numerator with the denominator and the denominator with the numerator. Okay, from here, it's really not that bad. What we're going to do is we're going to just multiply the top times the top and the bottom times the bottom. Those are your multiplication rules. If you need a reminder of these rules, you can check out some of my other videos on multiplying fractions, also found on Math-DrIlls.com. So first, let's multiply the numerators together. So we have 2 times 2. That's going to give me 4. I'm going to put a placeholder here. Whoops, change the color. Placeholder here, because I told you I was going to ignore that negative sign. And then I have 3 times 1, and that gives me 3. So, what do I have so far? Well, I have 2 times 2, 4 in the bottom, or in the top, and in the bottom I have 3 times 1, that's 3. And now I just need to figure out what am I going to do with my sign? Well, I need to remember my multiplication of integers rules. So if I have a positive times a positive, clearly I'm going to get a positive. But if I have a negative times a negative, if the signs are the same, I still get a positive number. It's when they're different signs that you get a negative. Either positive by a negative or negative by a positive, you're going to end up with a negative. But if the signs are the same, both positive or both negative, you're going to end up with a positive. In this case, the first fraction is a negative, the second one's a positive, so I'm going to end up with a negative fraction. Now, I think it's asking you to convert into a mixed number. So in this case, it would be -1/3, because that's -4/3 is -1/3. That's not a huge deal in my math classes. We really are a big fan of improper fractions. But of course, it's important to know how to convert. If you're looking at how to convert, essentially what we're looking for is how many times does 3 go into 4? It goes in 1 full time, and we're going to have 1 left over. So it's -1 and 1/3. All right, let's do another example. Let's do one that doesn't have half in it, so let's skip down to number 3. Number 3, okay, we're going to keep, change, flip again. So we're going to keep the first one the same. We're going to change to multiplication, and we are going to flip to multiply by the reciprocal. KCF, not KFC, KCF. So the first one, we're going to keep as negative 3 over 5. We're going to change it to multiplication, already done. And then we are going to flip this fraction to be 5 over 2. Now, you're going to keep the negative sign. The negative sign still stays there. Now, you're also wondering, why am I changing it from in front to the top? I like all my negative signs in the numerator. It just makes it a lot easier, especially when you get to advanced mathematics. All right, now let's just apply more rules. So we have negative 5 times negative 3. Well, if I have two negatives multiplied together, I'm going to end up with a positive based on these rules right here. Negative times negative gives me a positive. So it's going to end up with a positive 15. I'm going to erase that plus in a second. Then I have 5 times 2, and that is 10. Okay, so I had my numerators multiplied together, and then my denominators multiplied together, and I get positive 15 over 10. Okay, so I think what it's wanting you to do at this point is to simplify if possible. This can be simplified. So if I divide both the top and bottom by their greatest common factor, which is 5, I'm going to get 3 over 2. Now, 3 over 2 can be changed to a mixed number if we wanted to, which is 1 and 1/2. How many times does 2 go into 3? 1 time, and there's 1 left over, so 1 over 2, and it's positive. Okay, let's do one more, and I think that will be good. So let's skip down to number 9 here, and we are just going to keep, change, flip. We're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So instead of dividing, we're going to multiply. We're going to keep this first fraction the same, and we're going to change this to the reciprocal, 2 over 1. I have a negative 4 times a positive 2. That gives me a negative 8. And then I have a positive 5 in the denominator. For me, this is good, but if you wanted to convert this into a mixed number, we have 5 goes into 8 one full time, and there's 3 left over, 3 over 5, and that's my final answer. Hope you guys found this video helpful. If you have any questions on any of these problems, leave a comment below. Also, be sure to check out my multiplying integers or multiplying fractions videos if you need a refresher on some of these concepts I've been over. I look forward to seeing you next time right here on Wes Explains Best.